Many thanks for your company once again. This is your home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism. And today, unfortunately, Ghana has dropped 2 places in the latest Press Freedom Index, moving from 60th position in 2022 to 62nd in 2023 out of 180 countries. Well, Ghana has been witnessing a sustained decline in the Press Freedom rankings for a number of years now, since 2010, when we were first in Africa. Well, according to Reporters Without Borders, Ghana's decline in this year's ranking is mainly attributable to arrest of some 3 journalists in 2022, well, declaring the journalists' safety has seriously deteriorated over the years. Reporters Without Borders also cites the poor working conditions of journalists as a major factor. My colleague Kweku Asante joins me via Zoom with details of this particular report. Kweku, thanks for joining us this morning. Well, let's go through how Ghana fared in all the indicators used to compute this particular ranking.
So last year, Ghana was 60th globally. This time around, we've dropped 2 places. Like you said, we are now 62nd. They have the political context. They say that although Ghana is considered a regional model of democratic stability, journalists have experienced growing pressures in recent years. To protect their jobs and their security, they are increasingly resorting to self-censorship as government has shown itself to be intolerant of criticism. In addition, a third of the country's media outlets are owned by politicians or by people with ties to the leading political parties, and the content they produce is largely partisan. That is the main argument that Reporters Without Borders make in terms of the political context. If you look at the legal framework, it says that although freedom of the press is guaranteed by the 1992 Constitution, media outlets are free to operate as they like. There are significant concerns about a clause in the law that allows a fee to be charged if the information requested is in a language other than English. That is talking about the right to information law and how journalists are struggling sometimes to get the needed information. But this is also very, very important. Look at the economic context. It says that in Ghana, most media outlets face financial problems, reflecting in low salaries and poor working conditions for journalists. Newspapers are often launched only to fold within a certain time frame. On the other hand, government agencies and advertising contracts are paid for publishing news items. Non-transparent and inequitable processes are used to allocate state advertising. And then it goes to safety of journalists, where it talks about the 3 journalists who were arrested last year and the specific concern that the Reporters Without Borders have about these arrests.
Now, Kweku, in terms of the details, let's get into it. I know you've given us a general overview of everything when it comes to why we've dropped from 60th to 62nd as we speak. But how is Ghana faring when we talk political, legal, and the economic context?
So if you look at the political indicator, for instance, Ghana globally is 63rd. We fare 61.88. That is the point we get there. If you look at the economic indicator, Ghana is globally on the 80th position. It is one of the reasons why Ghana continues to drop, because of the economic indicator. The argument that a lot of journalists are not being properly remunerated, and so journalists are having to do a lot of things that undermines press freedom. And so on that score, Ghana is not doing so well. We score 47.94%, and we are 80th globally. In terms of legislations, the laws that exist to protect journalists, Ghana is doing fairly well. We are 31 in the world, scoring 79.62%. In terms of the security indicator, Ghana is also performing very poorly there. We placed 103 out of 180 countries in the world, and we score only 61.25%, making the concerns that journalists sometimes are being threatened in the line of their work. If you look at a political indicator, the idea that journalists are subservient to political parties, and that political parties and politically connected persons are the ones who own media houses. Ghana scores 54 and has 66.61%. Look at the economic indicator as well. From 2022, we have 69%, and then you come to this year where we have 47.2%. The security indicator, we seem to have dropped a few pointers from last year's 101 place out of 180 to this year's 103. So, and it's not looking so good. You look at last year and you look at this year, in terms of almost all the indicators, Ghana has deteriorated.
So much, Kweku, for giving us highlights of that particular Press Freedom rankings. And as we celebrate World Press Freedom Day, I wish you a happy Press Freedom Day as well. Kweku, thanks so much for joining us. Meanwhile, today marks 30 years in advocating press freedom the world over. Like I've been saying, here in Ghana, the journey has been quite tortuous, rough, but with some key successes worth celebrating. What all among them is the passage of the Right to Information Bill after decades of fight for wanting to, for us to pass it, and a very vibrant media landscape as well. That notwithstanding, there are still dozens of unresolved attacks on media organizations and abuses against journalists. Well, these have given rise to grave concerns about the safety of journalists as we go about our duties. How well have we performed in the last 30 years? And are we proud of the current state of press or its freedom in general in Ghana? And what is the future looking like? And let me bring in men and women who have paved the way for us, have been doing this training, they've been doing this for some time now before most of us have been able to come in. Professor of Journalism and Communications, Professor Kwame Kakari, joins us via Zoom. We also have Deputy Board Chairperson, Right to Information Commission, Elizabeth Hefron Asare, also joining us via Zoom. Many thanks for your company this morning here on the JoyNews desk. Very glad to see you both because at least there's a lot to tap into when it comes to your knowledge on this. Well, let me start with you, Prof. Really, the theme for today, we are looking at shaping a future of rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights. But it looks like Prof is not with us just yet. Let me bring in Madam Elizabeth. Thank you once again for your company. Whilst we wait for Prof to join us, you've been looking or hearing about the rankings. We'll talk about it shortly. But on a day like this, I bet if I ask, what for you should we be pondering over on a day like this? What would it be, you would say?
What we should be pondering over on a day like this, I would say that we have come a long way as media personnel. And I think that the press has moved from being kept and quieted to being able to express ourselves freely. But even in that space, we realize that it's not as rosy as we expect it to be. There's a lot more that we can be doing. There's a lot more that can be done for us. And so I would say that what I've been focusing on today is really, really having press freedom. The press freedom we have is relative. I say so because there's a lot of harassment, there's a lot of censorship, censorship by those that we are supposed to be working for. And so we do not move as freely as we would want to move. And again, we have seen over the years, particular media personnel being targeted, being harassed, being troubled. And so the media front is not as open and as free as we want it to be. It could be freer.
On a day that you've been talking about press freedom and how you would want it to be freer, I'm sure you've been hearing about the rankings for today, at least from 60th, and now we're at 62nd. And we've been hearing all the indicators, all of them almost dropping. What really is the issue? What are we not doing right? Because when you speak to those in charge or those who are supposed to make it free, they tell you that Ghana, when we talk about press freedom, we cannot say that we are not free. Yet we keep dropping. What really are we not getting right, you'd say?
It's a whole environmental issue. So you don't look at the media in isolation. You look at the environment in which the media is operating. And then you'll be able to decipher whether the media is really free or not. And currently, the media is operating in a space where, even though we have grown in number, we have not been given that kind of freedom that we need to be able to express ourselves. And I'm saying so because now you realize that even though there's a pluralization of the media, you have people who own the media, and therefore what they want is what their media house is supposed to churn out. So media houses are doing the bidding of their owners and those that oversee them. And so you can't say that the media is really free, because if you are working in a media house that does not want you to put out certain information, then it means that you just have to check the information. Even if the information is good for the nation and is good for building us and is good for bringing us together. Again, the polarization in the nation is what has also caused the media to be the way it is today. And so you realize that certain media houses have been linked to certain political parties, and therefore they play nothing but the tune of that political party. And so being objective is not really as objective as you'd expect it to be. You realize that some media houses are not really objective. They're rather playing the tune of their masters. And when it happens like that, you can't have a very objective media and you can't have a very open media. Again,
Okay.
you realize that our work comes with a lot of responsibility. But then you begin to see that we're doing a lot more speculation. And sometimes fake news creeps in there. And if you don't go out and really look for the facts, then you are found wanting. And we are not really giving the public two sides of the story. We are normally putting one out and expecting that whoever's name has been mentioned or whoever is being talked about will react, instead of going and getting a balanced story before putting it out.
Okay. Well, let me bring in Professor Kwame Kirikari, this time joining us via phone. Well, we're shaping a future of rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all human rights. That's the theme for today. But I would first want you to rate Ghana in pursuing this particular agenda. Are we on course?
Thank you. Well, the issue of Ghana sliding and rapidly in our international ranking of press freedom has to do with growing intolerance in the society, growing intolerance from all sectors of authority. When we talk about the clampdown on press freedom or the deficits in press freedom as we are observing nowadays, the traditional sources of oppression of press freedom continue. That is the security agencies, the police, and so on. They continue to be the major sources of clampdown on, or of major sources of threat to journalist safety and media safety, and therefore a threat to press freedom generally. But there are other sources of authority. Take, for instance, chiefs. We've seen in the last few years a number of chiefs arbitrarily, regardless of the law, the constitution, and what the constitution says in terms of the independence and protection of press freedom. Chiefs have been closing down radio stations left and right without government, without political parties raising any question, and without also media owners taking such chiefs to court. Why don't they take them to court? It's largely because these media owners are afraid of the power of chiefs in our political system today. That is one source. The other source is also the problem of the ownership issue, which is not transparent. Before, when this government came into office, what the NCA told us was that frequencies for radio and TV and so on in Accra, for instance, were exhausted. Yet, how many new radio and TV stations don't we see owned by leaders in the NPP party, for instance? The lack of transparency in the allocation of frequencies has been going on since the NCA was established in the 1990s. If a political party A comes to power, they control the NCA and allot these frequencies in favor of their party members. This is why we are having this lack of transparency in broadcasting ownership, for
Okay.
instance.
Okay.
Now, again, if you take the law, broadcasting, there's no law concerning broadcasting. There has been a broadcasting bill in Parliament for the last 20 or more years. Nothing is happening. Now that bill has become obsolete. Changes in, the technology and in society and so on have made the contents there obsolete, and a new one needs to be completely formulated and legislated. But why would the Parliament, as it is, come up with any new broadcasting law that will promote a democratic broadcasting framework? No, they wouldn't, because their parties own the majority of radio stations around the country, and they want the status quo as it is. So essentially, what we are seeing is the failure of the political system we are running in terms of media freedom, but also in terms of freedom of expression.
Okay.
The parties have dominated the space for public expression so much so that if you express any critical issue now, and because it is MPP in power, then you are NDC. If NDC is in power, then you are the
MPP.
So beyond press freedom, at the general level of freedom of expression, free speech in terms of public affairs, there is also a deficit, except that these monitors by the RSF and so on, they concentrate only on media freedom, which is very easily quantifiable. But the broad spectrum of freedom of expression, free speech, in relation to politics and so on, in relation to the order of the day, has also gone down.
Okay.
Because,
well, if I may come in on this, and this is a question I would like to put to both of you, because it's a day for reflection as well. But media tend to be very defensive when it comes to what they ought to also do right, for which reason some say may lead to the curtailment, which is not supposed to be the case in any way. But I would want to find out from you both, what exactly would you say that the media also ought to do right in terms of playing its role that would lead to this freedom of expression, which would not be curtailed at any point in time?
Yes, somebody on this program spoke about self-censorship. Yes, there is a lot of self-censorship, and if you have observed the media's functions from 1992 when the Constitution came in, self-censorship has become much more prominent now. The independence of the media in terms of their editorial judgment, editorial decision-making, has continued to slide downwards. And take, for instance, the state-owned media. What do we see from graphic, GBC, and so on? Rarely do you see any discussion of a critical nature about whatever government is in office now.
Okay.
Whether it's NDC or NPP, the editors, the managers continue to self-censor for reasons that I don't understand, but also because of subtle, not very open ways of pressure from a ruling party and ruling government on these managers of our media.
Okay.
If you ask the Minister of Information now and other agents, they'll tell you that they don't interfere with the state-owned media.
But do they really not interfere?
The interference goes on in very subtle ways that we don't see obviously, of course. Let me take all kinds of pressure on this. But I think, again, it is the failure of individual persons put in positions of responsibility to assert their right. The Constitution protects editors of the state-owned media and so on. So why do they allow themselves to be pressurized? It's because they themselves are not committed to the democracy we are talking about. Democracy can only grow if the people for whom the constitutions are made stand up
Okay.
So it's not a question of playing a martyr's role, but it is a question of insisting on what your responsibility is.
Okay,
And somebody will ask, so what
Prof,
if I am
let me bring in Madam
what?
Elizabeth on this as well, because I'm itching to hear her views when it comes to what the media is also not doing right. We've heard the GJA, for instance, hold a press conference, and we'll be getting to their press conference today as well. Back then, their concern is that the criminal libel law, it appears that it's been brought back through the back door. Really, are we saying that the media does not have any role to play in where we are sliding backwards to?
The media has a lot of role to play, and like Prof said, if we do not take the bull by the horns, then we'll be shoved left, right, center, and then we'll just be moving according to the dictates of the powers that be or those in authority. Again, I think that the media needs to sit up when it comes to the personnel that they employ to work in the media houses. You realize that because they're not paid well, you don't really get a lot of trained journalists working in the media front. And you realize that a lot of them are learning on the job. And so, like Prof said, instead of being very authoritative and being assertive, you cower because you are afraid of those in authority. But if you're a media person, if you're a journalist or you're a media person worth your salt, you'll be able to stand your ground and know that the Constitution protects you and know that there are laws that will back you. Like you said, the libel law is being brought through the back door. Who is allowing it? If we do not continue to fight against it and ensure that there is no libel law, then anybody would bring it through the back door and use it. So then media also needs to stand together as a body. Currently, I don't see that. Even though we have the GJA, I don't see the GJA's front as being strong because there are a lot of people who are on the sidelines, who are on the periphery, who would not get involved with what GJA is doing or with what any other media institution is doing because it doesn't serve their purpose. And again, I think that the media today is more money conscious than doing a good job. And so you do the least for whatever you can get. And you used to refer to it as stomach journalism. But you see that a lot of people would satisfy their own interest and their own wants above what is national.
Okay, we're grateful. Thank you so much. I'd like to wish you a happy World Press Freedom Day also. Thank you so much for joining us. Madam Elizabeth Hayfron-Astari, and then also Professor Kwame Karikari. Well, this is an all-day talk, all week, all day. We have to keep on talking about freedom of expression, press freedom, and also this particular ranking. And we'll definitely come back to you again. Thank you so much for joining us.